You clean your floors. You wipe your counters. The surfaces look spotless. But a category of household particulate too small to see with the naked eye may be quietly undermining your respiratory health, particularly if you are over the age of 65. Across the country, senior households are accumulating microscopic irritants in locations that rarely get attention during routine cleaning. These particles bypass the body's natural defenses and settle deep into lung tissue, and for aging respiratory systems, the consequences compound over time. Most people understand dust as something visible, the kind that collects on a shelf or floats through a beam of sunlight. But the particles that pose the greatest risk to lung health are far smaller. Fine particulate matter, classified as PM 2.5 and below, measures less than 2.5 microns in diameter. To put that in perspective, a single human hair is roughly 70 microns wide. At the PM 2.5 scale, you could line up nearly 30 of these particles across the width of one strand of hair and still have room to spare. At that size, particles slip past the nose hairs and mucous membranes that ordinarily trap larger debris. Instead of being caught and expelled, they travel deep into the bronchioles and alveoli, the smallest structures of the lung where oxygen exchange occurs. Once lodged there, they interact directly with the thin, moist tissue that separates inhaled air from the bloodstream. In younger adults, the immune response within lung tissue is generally efficient at identifying and clearing these intruders. Macrophages, the white blood cells that patrol the lungs, engulf foreign particles and remove them through normal biological processes. The turnover rate is high enough that most fine particulate exposure in a healthy younger person is managed without lasting consequence. But pulmonology research has consistently shown that this clearance mechanism slows with age. After the age of roughly 50, lung capacity begins a measurable decline. The elasticity of lung tissue decreases, the surface area available for gas exchange gradually shrinks, and the macrophage population becomes less responsive. The inflammatory response triggered by fine particulate exposure becomes less precise and more prolonged. Rather than a quick, targeted reaction that neutralizes the irritant and subsides, the aging immune system tends to mount a broader, slower inflammatory response that lingers. The result is a kind of low-grade, chronic irritation that accumulates quietly, often without producing symptoms dramatic enough to prompt a visit to a doctor. Over months and years, this persistent low-level inflammation contributes to a gradual decline in respiratory function that many people attribute simply to getting older, without recognizing that their indoor environment is a contributing factor. There is also a dimension specific to long-term occupancy that is rarely discussed. A home lived in for 10, 20, or 30 years accumulates layers of particulate matter in places that almost never get cleaned. These are not the surfaces people think about when they pick up a cloth or run a vacuum. They are the zones above eye level and below furniture, the crevices behind appliances, the interior surfaces of ductwork, the gaps between baseboard molding and flooring, the space beneath radiators and heating units. In homes where the same person has lived for decades, these reservoirs can hold years of compacted material, undisturbed and slowly degrading. Each layer contains a record of the environmental conditions at the time it was deposited, including whatever pollutants, allergens, and biological material were present in the air. As these layers age, their chemical composition changes. Organic components break down and release volatile compounds. Mold spores that were dormant may become active if humidity levels shift. The material becomes, in effect, more irritating over time rather than less. This is compounded by the fact that older homes tend to have more of the architectural features that create particulate traps. Textured ceilings, crown molding with ornate profiles, radiator covers with narrow slats, window casings with deep reveals, all of these provide surface area for dust accumulation in locations that are difficult to access and easy to overlook. Newer construction tends towards smoother, simpler surfaces that are easier to wipe down, but the majority of seniors in the United States live in homes that were built decades ago, with design features that were never evaluated for their role in indoor air quality. Among the most overlooked collection points in any home are the surfaces above head height. The tops of kitchen cabinets, ceiling fan blades, upper closet shelves, and the housings of light fixtures all serve as long-term reservoirs for particulate matter. Because these areas sit outside normal sight lines and are physically difficult to reach, especially for older adults with limited mobility, they tend to go unaddressed for months or even years at a stretch. In some cases, particularly in kitchens where cabinets do not extend fully to the ceiling, the gap between the cabinet top and the ceiling becomes a shelf-like surface that collects material continuously with no natural mechanism for removal. The material that accumulates there is not ordinary dust in the way most people picture it. It is a concentrated mixture of dead skin cells, textile fibers, pet dander, pollen, insect debris, cooking grease vapor residue, and in many cases, mold spores. The cooking grease component is particularly relevant in kitchens, because it acts as a binding agent. Airborne grease particles land on cabinet tops and fan blades and create a sticky surface layer that traps subsequent particulate more effectively than a dry surface would. Over time, this mixture compacts and ages, and its composition becomes increasingly irritating to human airways. The biological components degrade and fragment into smaller particles. The grease oxidizes and can release aldehydes and other volatile organic compounds. What started as a thin film of household dust becomes a concentrated patch of material with genuine irritant potential. The problem intensifies when these deposits are disturbed. A ceiling fan switched on after a period of disuse launches particles directly into the air at breathing height. The rotational force flings material off the blade edges in a pattern that distributes it broadly across the room. A window opened on a breezy day creates crossdrafts that pull material off cabinet tops and redistribute it through the room. Even the convective air currents generated by heating systems can lift particles from elevated surfaces and carry them downward into the zone where people breathe. In winter months, when windows tend to stay closed and heating systems run continuously, this recirculation pattern can sustain elevated particulate levels in the breathing zone for hours at a time without any visible indication that it is occurring. This mechanism explains a pattern that many seniors and their caregivers recognize but often misattribute. Persistent sniffles, a scratchy throat, mild congestion, and itchy eyes that seem to come and go without following a seasonal pattern are frequently blamed on allergies or recurring colds. In many cases, the actual source is an overhead dust reservoir being periodically disturbed. The symptoms tend to improve when the person leaves the house and return when they come back, a pattern consistent with an indoor environmental trigger rather than an infectious or seasonal one. Some individuals report that symptoms worsen at specific times, such as when the furnace kicks on in the morning or when a particular room is entered after being closed up for a period. These temporal patterns point strongly toward an indoor particulate source rather than an outdoor allergen or a viral infection. Soft surfaces present a different but equally significant problem. Carpeting, heavy drapes, upholstered furniture, and decorative fabric items such as throw pillows and stuffed cushions all function as deep traps for fine particulate matter. Unlike hard floors or bare walls, these materials have complex fiber structures that capture and hold particles at multiple depths, making surface-level cleaning largely ineffective at removing what has settled into the lower layers. A plush carpet, for example, can hold several times its weight in trapped particulate before it begins to look visibly dirty. The material accumulates from the surface downward, with the finest and most respirable particles migrating deepest into the fiber matrix where they are essentially impossible to reach with consumer-grade cleaning equipment. A significant portion of the particulate matter embedded in household soft surfaces originates outdoors. Vehicle exhaust residue, pesticide drift, industrial pollutants, and pollen are all tracked into the home on shoes and clothing. Studies of indoor dust composition have consistently found traces of lead, cadmium, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons in residential carpeting, particularly in homes located near busy roads or in urban areas. Once inside, these particles settle into carpet fibers and fabric weaves, where they bond with indoor contaminants like skin cells, cooking residue, and cleaning product chemicals. The resulting mixture is more complex and potentially more irritating than any single component on its own. For a senior spending the majority of their day indoors, the cumulative exposure to this blend of indoor and outdoor particulate through soft surface contact is substantial. Standard vacuuming, the most common method people use to address carpet dust, often makes the situation worse in the short term. Many older or lower-cost vacuum cleaners lack sealed HEPA filtration systems. Without that seal, the vacuum picks up larger debris from the carpet surface but exhausts a plume of finer particles back into the room through its motor housing and filter gaps. The air immediately after vacuuming with one of these machines can contain higher concentrations of respirable particulate than before the cleaning began. The agitation of the vacuum head against the carpet fibers also dislodges material from deeper layers and suspends it in the air column, where it can remain airborne for several hours before resettling. For a senior with compromised lung function, vacuuming with an inadequate machine in a closed room is one of the higher-risk routine activities they can perform in terms of acute particulate exposure. Upholstered furniture presents a related challenge. Sofas, armchairs, and recliners accumulate particulate in their cushion filling, in the crevices between seat and back cushions, and in the fabric covering itself. Every time a person sits down, shifts position, or stands up, the compression and release of the cushion material forces air through the fabric, carrying fine particles with it. This creates a small but repeated exposure event that occurs dozens of times per day in a household where the same seating is used consistently. For seniors who spend significant portions of the day seated in a favorite chair, this repeated low-level exposure adds up. The particles released from upholstered furniture tend to be a mixture of fabric fibers, skin cells, food debris, and whatever has settled into the cushions from the surrounding air over time. HEPA air purifiers are frequently recommended as a solution to indoor air quality problems, and they do offer genuine benefit. A true HEPA filter captures 99.97% of particles at the 0.3 micron size, which is the most penetrating particle size for that filter type. Particles both larger and smaller than 0.3 microns are actually captured at even higher rates, due to the different physical mechanisms by which filtration works at various particle sizes. For many households, adding a quality air purifier to the main living space and bedroom produces a noticeable improvement in air quality and respiratory comfort. That said, these devices have practical limitations that are not always well understood by consumers. An air purifier only cleans the air that physically passes through its filter. This means its effectiveness is determined not just by the quality of the filter but by the volume of air it can move and the path that air takes through the room. Placement determines effectiveness. A unit sitting in the far corner of a living room does relatively little for the air quality at a couch on the opposite side, especially in a room with poor circulation or where furniture creates barriers to airflow. For meaningful coverage, the purifier needs to be positioned near the breathing zone of the space where the person spends the most time, and it needs to be appropriately sized for the room's square footage. A unit rated for 200 square feet will not meaningfully clean the air in a 400 square foot open-plan living area. Many consumers purchase units that are undersized for their space and then conclude that air purification does not work, when the issue is simply one of capacity and placement. Filter maintenance is another factor that degrades performance over time. HEPA filters have a finite lifespan, and as they load with captured particulate, their airflow resistance increases. A heavily loaded filter forces the purifier's fan to work harder to move the same volume of air, which reduces the effective clean air delivery rate. Most manufacturers recommend filter replacement every 6 to 12 months, but in homes with high particulate loads, filters may reach capacity sooner. A visual check is not always reliable, since the finest particles that pose the greatest health risk are too small to see even on a loaded filter. Following the manufacturer's replacement schedule, or erring on the side of earlier replacement, is the more prudent approach. Beyond portable purifiers, the central HVAC system represents both an opportunity and a common failure point. Most homes come equipped with a basic fiberglass filter in the return air vent. These filters carry a MERV rating of 1 to 4, which means they capture only the largest airborne particles, things like lint and large dust clumps. They exist primarily to protect the HVAC equipment from debris buildup, not to improve indoor air quality. They do almost nothing to reduce fine particulate matter in the air circulating through the home. Upgrading to a filter rated MERV 11 or 13 makes a measurable difference in whole home air quality. These filters capture a much broader range of particle sizes, including many in the PM2.5 range, without restricting airflow enough to strain most residential HVAC systems. Filters rated MERV 14 and above offer even finer filtration but may reduce airflow to a degree that causes problems in systems not designed for that level of resistance, so it is worth checking with an HVAC technician before going above MERV 13. The HVAC ductwork itself is another factor. In homes where ducts have not been cleaned in many years, the interior surfaces accumulate a layer of particulate that gets redistributed into the living space every time the system runs. Duct cleaning is a service that varies widely in quality, and not all providers are equally thorough, but in homes with very old, never cleaned ductwork, a professional cleaning can reduce the baseline particulate load in the air noticeably. The return air vents, where air is pulled back into the system for reconditioning, are particularly important to keep clear. A clogged or dusty return vent reduces system efficiency and can create negative pressure zones that pull unconditioned, unfiltered air into the home through gaps in the building envelope. Several other locations in the home function as persistent dust sources that rarely receive attention. The condenser coils behind or beneath a refrigerator collect thick layers of dust and lint over time. Because the compressor generates heat as part of the refrigeration cycle, that warm air rises and carries particles into the kitchen environment. In homes where the refrigerator has not been pulled out for cleaning in several years, the coil area can harbor a dense mat of material that continuously seeds the kitchen air with fine particulate. The warmth also creates a favorable environment for dust mites, whose fecal matter is itself a potent allergen and respiratory irritant. Bathroom exhaust fans accumulate dense mats of dust on their blades and housing, reducing their effectiveness at removing moisture and potentially redistributing particles every time they run. A bathroom fan caked with dust moves less air and moves dirtier air than a clean one. Since these fans are typically installed directly above the shower or bathtub area, where warm moist air rises, the combination of heat and humidity can promote mold growth within the dust layer on the fan itself. When the fan runs, it can then distribute mold spores into the bathroom air. Cleaning a bathroom exhaust fan is a relatively simple task, usually requiring only the removal of the cover and wiping down the blades, but it is one that most households never perform. Dryer vents, both interior lint traps and exterior exhaust lines, are another source of fine fiber particulate that can migrate into living spaces if seals are imperfect or if the vent line is partially obstructed. Lint that escapes the primary trap can accumulate in the vent hose and at the exterior vent flap, and in homes where the dryer is located in an interior room or closet, any leakage from the vent connections releases fine textile fibers directly into the indoor air. Beyond the air quality concern, lint accumulation in dryer vents is a well-documented fire hazard, which gives additional reason to inspect and clean these components regularly. Window tracks and door thresholds are additional entry points for outdoor particulate that are frequently overlooked. The narrow channels in which sliding windows and patio doors travel collect a mixture of outdoor dirt, pollen, insect debris, and moisture-related residue. When windows are opened or closed, this material can be disturbed and released into the indoor air. Weather stripping around doors and windows that has degraded over time allows fine outdoor particulate to infiltrate the home even when doors and windows are closed, particularly on windy days or in homes located near unpaved roads or construction sites. Addressing indoor microdust does not require expensive professional intervention or physically demanding labor. A practical routine built around a few consistent habits can substantially reduce particulate levels in a senior household without creating undue strain. The key is consistency rather than intensity. If you see more about video on retirement for seniors, please like and subscribe the channel. Thank you for watching and see you again on the next video.